Heather Whitson. I am at Duke University, and I'm part of the HCSRN-OAICs Aging Initiative. So Aging Initiative is an NIA-funded initiative with the goal of connecting investigators and resources within the HMO research network with those that are in the Claude D. Older American Independent Centers. And we're hoping to create a national resource that would advance an interdisciplinary research agenda focused on multiple chronic conditions. So if you received the information about the webinar, it's because you may be already part of either the HMO Research Network or the Pepper Centers. If you're not, then I'm glad that we work this information to you anyway. So there will be opportunities to learn more about the Aging Initiative in general and how to get more information about it. And we will continue to have this webinar series. We'll pick up again in the fall. This is actually our last webinar in the series for the spring. So without further ado, we have, just to give you a little bit of an orientation on the format today, we are very pleased to have 3 speakers joining us today representing 3 different funding entities to talk to us about specific opportunities related to multiple chronic conditions research. So each speaker will speak for about 10 minutes, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers related to that particular presentation or questions related to that particular or agency. And then after all 3 of the presentations, we'll have sort of an open forum for questions. For those of you who are looking at the webinar and have that interface in front of you on your computer, you'll see under the participants icon, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, and if you're looking on your participants icon, you should see a little tiny square icon that has a hand inside of it. That is the way that you can raise your hand. So interrupting the speakers as they're talking, we'll ask everyone to put their lines on mute while the speakers are talking. And then if you have a question, please just click your icon there, and after the speakers are finished, we'll call on you and then ask you to put your line off of mute so that we can hear your question. Another option is to submit your questions through the Q&A icon, also located at the upper right. If there are no questions, I'm going to go ahead and we'll move to the first 3 speakers. And we're very thankful to have Marcel Salive joining us today. He oversees the research portfolio on multimorbidity treatment and prevention in the Division of Geriatrics and Clinical Gerontology at the National Institute on Aging at the NIH. So thank you, Marcel.
Thank you, Heather. It's great to be here, and I will try to give a quick overview of the NIA and our research program. Next slide, please. The NIA, I'll cover that, and then some of our types of grants, such as career grants, the GENDAR program, the investigator-initiated grant, and some talk about the interests of NIA related to multimorbidity. So NIA's mission is very focused on aging and older populations and special needs there, but we also have a mission, in addition to all the research, to train, assist, and develop resources. So this grant, in fact, is a resource development grant that we're focused on, but that's little of what I'll talk about. Next slide, please. So we like to hear in the initial portion of your grant submissions how you will address questions of aging, and this is just some examples from a variety of topics. How we want to understand the aging process, as well as understand age-related diseases, and multimorbidity, polypharmacy, and geriatric syndromes, really special problems of the aging that we try to look at. So the organization, I will give you a high overview of that because we have 4 grant divisions. So I am from the Division of Pediatrics, clinical gerontology, and that has 3 branches: the geriatrics, clinical gerontology, and clinical trust branches. But in our clinical focus, there are divisions focus on behavioral and social research, aging technology, and neuroscience. And in all that, we have an NIA and intramural program as well, but focus on the grant side. Next slide. All the people from Pepper Centers, this is just a quick overview and orientation that we do have a Pepper Center program, and if you're affiliated with it, it does have within it pilot grant programs that are a good initial foray, and those are administered locally by the Pepper Centers themselves. But Arbor administers the overall Pepper Center program, which shown in this slide. It may be from 2013, but it's progressing on, and we still have centers, and we are continuing to fund the Pepper Center. Next, and we did about the coalition through this kind of the Pepper Centers with the HMO network. So the geriatrics and clinical gerontology has a large number of themes that we focus on with our research grants. And, this is just a long listing of them. I won't read through. A useful resource going forward. Next slide. In fact, to understand NIA, one of the best ways is to look on our webpage listed here and drill down to the research and funding. It always has an up-to-date list of open funding opportunities from NIA. Next slide. There are different ways we fund research, and just high level, there's dedicated money that we have known as RFAs, or requests for applications. In that one area, there's some money. Other programs have our general grant pool. RFAs are about 10 to 15% of the overall portfolio. They focus on high needs that we have currently, usually single due date and reviewed in-house. And the rest are broad-based and what's our interest in certain topics, and also some multiple chronic conditions program announcements. Next slide. So a program called GEMSTAR, click ahead, that's focused on targeting the early career development of investigators. And this, I think, is a very good, after the pilot projects I mentioned, to really look for grant funding that can work with them and develop the pilot funding to develop one's career. Next slide. STAR program is had about 5 years. Next slide. And was really recently repeated, and we expect it to last at least another 5 years after this. So the details of a lot of the of it. The bottom there lists that we tweak slightly in the announcement each year, but it generally is for specialists who want into aging research in their specialty, either medical or surgery. Next slide. We advanced in that the Mentor Development Awards, or K Awards, that start with the K3. And we also have the Beeson Award, viewed kind of the crown jewel of NIA career development grants. There's as well for more advanced faculty that are such as the K2, K07, and the mid-entering K24 are available to on research grants. Next slide is on the investigated grants, and these are taking your own ideas and developing them into a project that would last 2 to 5 years, and really help either explore and develop that program or a full-fledged R01 program. And in terms, given our time, I will just say that the NIA is committed to funding the new investigators, and to that point, we do have sort of bonus points method fund investigators to match up with how investigators do on the reviews, and it really works to advantage of the early career investigators. It's all ones, it's not for the other smaller grants. Next slide. We do have, as I said, some funding opportunities out now for multiple chronic conditions. We've had in the past some money, but currently we have only program announcements areas such as self-management or chronic conditions, behavioral interventions to address that, and a secondary data analysis program announcement. Next slide. But we do it as well in our division of syndrome and disease-specific program announcements that are out there, and they're summarized on this slide. And many of these can be, I think, tailored to multiple chronic condition questions as well, questions of comorbidity, polypharmacy, and other topics to investigators. Next slide. So, next slide, please. NIA grants page that I showed you earlier. This is the NIH grants page, grants.nih.gov, which really is much more searchable and can use across the institutes at NIH. So there are 27 institutes. There's all actively solicit grants, and this is a server where you can request the Friday update from the site. Next slide. So this sort of talks some tips. Do you have, I think, I try to highlight some things that are tailored to the career stage. Collaborate, have specialty societies. We have NIA resources, which availability of older animals, large epidemiologic databases. Through the panel, some other specific resources. Some other interesting projects, one of which I should highlight is the U13 conferences. We fund collaborative conferences. With recent one was on multimorbidity and cardiovascular disease, and highlighted on our website. We just posted that last week, and there's some resources listed there. And with the U13 conferences, some opportunities for travel awards to junior investigators to come and really get exposed to the field and learn where fields are headed. Next slide. About the resources that I mentioned and GIF's website. Next slide. As well, and I've posted a few comments on the blog in the past about multiple chronic condition funding announcements and other have become available. So it's been kind of a whirlwind talk here, but I would be happy to answer questions on specific issues. Next slide. And there are other opportunities as well. One is recently out of the Center for Scientific Review that early age investigators to become reviewers and gain that review experience that can be very helpful about developing your own scientific ideas. How would they review, learn by doing some review? Next slide. We staff, including myself, are very happy to review your ideas and give feedback on specific aims for grants. And this is my contact information as well as my colleagues in the geriatric conclude and turn it back to Heather. Next slide.
All right, Marcel. And if someone has a question that they'd like to address to Marcel at this point, please just click the little hand icon, which on the side panel and under attendees you should see a little icon. And Catherine, I think there a question, and you may need to unmute your line by clicking on the little microphone.
Hi, this is Catherine.
Hi, welcome.
Thanks for that talk. I was wondering if these opportunities that you described are also open to Canadian researchers?
Are and some are not. I think the way to check that is to run in the specific funding announcements under eligibility, and our career development grants are not eligible for foreign investigators, for non-U.S. investigators, but I believe that some of the grant programs for initiated grants are available for foreign investigators. That's very broad, and specifics are addressed in each funding announcement specifically.
Patrick
Great,
Monahan, I think we have a question from Patrick as well.
No. Hello, you hear me?
You can.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Heather. I actually do not have a question. It was I had asked Catherine a question earlier about the mic, and I got that answered. So.
Oh, okay. Technical question. Got it. I see Jenny Lund with a hand raised.
Yes, I entered in a question and was wondering actually if PFAs programs are non-medical trainees.
The GEMSTAR program is specifically for medical specialists. There are some K grants that are for PhDs or non-medical professionals. And the GEMS is the RO3 mechanism, and that the RO mechanism in general could be used by anybody, just the GEMSTAR. So that is look at the eligibility again for the grant, or we'd be happy to answer specifically. As a niche was at medical surgical specialist.
All right. I think at this point, in order to keep us on track, let's move on to our second of the three talks. And again, just if people have questions, always use the hand raise function, and we'll call at the end of this talk. Our next speaker is Dr. Neeraj Arora, and Dr. Arora recently joined the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or PCORI, a senior program officer in PCORI's Improving Health Systems program. Prior to joining PCORI, Dr. Arora worked for 14 years as a program director at the National Cancer Institute, where he led a program of research in the area of patient-centered cancer care. His research interests focus on improving the quality of health delivery for individuals living with multiple chronic conditions. Dr. Arora, thank you for being with us.
Yes, thanks, Heather, and it's a pleasure to present at this webinar, especially for people to further engage with Marcel, and then also making connections with Joy. So thanks for this opportunity. So I'm going to again do the same what Marcel did, give you a very quick overview of things that we've been doing at PCORI broadly, and then specific to MCCs. So next slide, please. As I said, give you a quick overview of PCORI, talk about some of the MCC-supported research, and then our funding announcements, which I'm assuming is of most interest to all of you. Next. For you who don't know PCORI, let me just give you, a very high-level overview. First of all, PCORI is not a federal government organization. We were authorized by Congress in 2010 as part of the ACA, and we are governed by a 21-member board of governors who essentially leads all the final decisions on, study fund. What I want to clarify here is that what we call largely funds comparative effectiveness research, and the focus of most of the contracts that we fund on interventions that have already proven to have some kind of efficacy data, and to compare them with head comparisons with comparators. The ideal study would be where you have multiple interventions that have efficacy data available, and we're doing a head-to-head trial of those. We also fund studies where you have an intervention and the comparator's usual care. And as you can see in the second bullet, it says that we fund things via a contract. We don't fund grants; they are contracts. So, or in what might be a cooperative agreement that under the NIH. So there's close consultation and communication between the program office at PCORI and our bodies. And finally, the third bullet, as it says, that we seek to really answer real questions about what works best patients based on their particular circumstances and concerns. And all about our process of doing research, we emphasize a lot on stakeholder input, patient caregivers, and the broader healthcare community. So our questions are driven by what patients and their family members really care about, and we require and expect our awardees to involve the community in not only collecting but also design of the studies, and then thinking through with them about how the results can be implemented. Next slide, please. So a real quick snapshot. Since we've existed, we funded about 355 contracts, and up to the tune of almost $750 million. And our awards have been funded at almost every state in the country. Next slide. PCORI had identified 5 national priorities of research, and we in our science program are organized based on those 5 priorities. So our program is focusing on assessment of prevention, diagnosis, and treatment options. So that's your classic CR studies where you may have head comparisons of treatment A versus treatment B, or methods of preventing and compared to another method. The program where I reside at PCORI is the Improving Healthcare Systems program. We fund studies where the focus of our interventions are largely at the systems level. So it'll be a study on care coordination, transitions in care, for instance, patient navigation, etc. Our program is communication and dissemination research. A lot of our work on patient communication, risk communication, how do we really optimally explain findings from research to patients and clinicians so that they can use that information to make better decisions. All of that gets housed in that program. That program also focuses a lot on dissemination research. One of the major focus of PCORI is essentially that we don't studies. The endpoint of our contracts is not publications. Publications is not enough for dissemination. We don't want of our studies to make a difference in the lives of our patients and their caregivers. So that's the reason why we largely focus on interventions that have already some proven efficacy data on them. Our next program, which is doesn't require much explanation, is addressing disparities. So their emphasis a lot on in terms of reducing disparities both in care delivery as well as on patient-centered outcomes. And we have a 5th program that focuses a lot on methodological research. And the emphasis is on how to fund studies that can help with proving the methodological rigor of competitive effectiveness research. So those are essentially 5 programs around which are organized as far as funding is concerned. Next slide. The next slide. This basically gives some examples of what's the difference between our different programs. Next slide. Let's talk about quickly. So what are we doing in terms of multiple chronic conditions? We have to date funded 16 contracts to the tune of about $30 million. If you look at the pie chart, these contracts are distributed across our 4 programs. This does not include our studies that we funded on methods. These are largely the intervention studies. Some are in our addressing disparities program because they touch on one or the other specific population of interest. For instance, we have one study focusing largely on Native Americans, and other studies focus on Pacific Islanders. A couple of studies focusing on receiving care and safety net settings. And 4 of the studies are housed in our IHS, that's the Health Systems program, that's my program, which in those studies focus on how can we improve the care delivery at the system level for patients with multiple chronic conditions. Another of our contracts are in the communication and dissemination research program, largely focusing on provider communication issues, and there's one in our prevention, diagnosis, and treatment options program. The other pie chart at the bottom of the slide, if you look at it, shows that in terms of study designs, large majority of them are randomized controlled trials, where most of our funding goes, although we do have a few studies that look at observational or large-scale secondary data analyses as well. I will skip the bar chart, but just to let you know quickly, that just summarizes what are the priority positions that PCORI is interested in looking at, especially if studies have emphasis on those populations, and we look at them very closely. Next slide. To disentangle, especially as I prepared for this talk, I wanted to see are there any specific disease clusters that we funded more than others? But actually, as you see, the first bar, 7 of the 16 contracts are basically focused on MCCs broadly, so all comers, as long as the main population has 2 or more chronic conditions. We do have few studies, and largely these focus on looking at health issues along with other physical chronic conditions. So there's one study focusing on multiple sclerosis and depression and chronic pain simultaneously. A couple of studies focusing on obesity and high blood pressure within the context of one or more chronic conditions like diabetes, cardiac illnesses. Study on end-stage renal disease and depression, and then looking at depression plus diabetes and heart failure. So that's essentially the landscape of description of the type of studies and population we funded so far. Next slide, please. This slide gives you an example of some of these specific studies that we funded so far, and I'll focus on the first one. This is a study that looks at improving care transitions for people with elderly people with 2 or more chronic conditions who have an emergency department visit. So there is how can we really help these patients when they're being discharged, them with community resources so that we can avoid readmissions to the emergency department. And studies focus on a broad range of interventions ranging from role of community health workers, look at technology, the impact of a patient health portal for patients with multiple chronic conditions. Studies looking at patient provider communication and how patients to articulate their goals of care prior to a visit with their providers, what impact does that have on their self-management and quality of life. So we're running a range of studies to look at, but clearly, as you can see, there are a lot of other studies that we could be funding, as MCCs is indeed one of the solutions of interest for PCORI. Next slide. So I'll run through, so in terms of funding announcement, what do we do? So we have basically two specific types of funding announcements. One is what we call our funding initiative. This is investigator-initiated, so more in the realm of regular R01s or even pays the NIH, where is that we want to solicit ideas from the investigator community. But keep in mind here that each of our 5 programs has their own funding announcement. 2 cycles of the broads every year. So essentially you have 5 funding announcements that happen twice. So if you have a study idea that's related to improving health systems, you will apply to the health systems PCORI funding announcement, as opposed to addressing disparities. And you're welcome to always talk to us if you have if you want clarity on which one you should be applying to. So the broad funding announcements, our budget on these is $1.5 million in direct cost over 3 years for programs. And recently we instituted some larger studies within our health systems program, where we fund up to $1 million over 5 years in cost. So as much as $1 million a year in direct costs can be supported for our larger studies. Our second studies that are what we call pragmatic clinical studies. We used to call them large pragmatic studies. Some of you may be aware of them. And these are ones where we specify in detail the kind of research topics where we are looking for studies to come in. These are head comparisons of really large representative study samples, where the idea is that once these studies are done, then they are ready for prime time to be implemented widely. And we up to a maximum of $10 million in direct costs for 5 years, so up to $2 million in direct costs per year can be funded. So these are really large studies. And we had announced our first awards in February 2015, where we funded our first studies, and these awards are ongoing as well. I want to mention that both our broad solicitation and pragmatic studies require a very active letter of intent screening process, where we require our applicants to send a letter of intent, which we screen, and then we invite those who have been approved to submit full applications. We also have ad hoc basis. We've done some targeted funding announcements. One of them is collaboration with Marcel and others at NIA, where we're looking at a large project on falls prevention. Those happen periodically, but not on a regular basis. Next slide. So we have 5 key criteria by which applications are reviewed, and these are the slide. One is we want you to show what's the impact of the condition on health of individuals. Is this high impact condition? Is this condition that really has a big burden on the American public? Potential for study to improve healthcare and outcomes. Will the findings from the study really make a difference, result in something that's going to change either patient-centered outcomes or healthcare delivery practice? Technical, of course, is the most. With us, none of these others matter. Patientness is very important. So, if these research questions are answered, what's the so what thing? And does it really matter to patients and the family members? And finally, as I said in the beginning, we put a priority on patient and stakeholder engagement. So that I will end and for questions. Thank you.
That was very helpful. If anyone has a question, you can just use the raise your hand icon, and I'll keep an eye out for that. While people are doing that, I was also going to mention we've had several questions submitted about if this information will be available after a webinar, and everyone should receive a link for an audio, and we can also provide a PDF of the slides of request. So you can contact Catherine after the webinar if you would like to receive that. And specific questions about PCORI? Day Kim?
Yeah, Heather, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering about some of the funded observational studies. One of the previous slides. I mean, whether the observational study appropriate for comparative effectiveness research. Because if we're interested in comparing different established treatments as alternative options, I mean, has there been an observational research that's actually funded to do comparative effectiveness? Because I'm wondering if there is any, ideally, randomized trial is the answer, but for practical reasons and limitations, especially with a very, very old population, randomization is not quite feasible. I mean, is PCORI consider would PCORI consider observational study design as a way of evaluating comparative effectiveness?
Great question. So, Dave, if you, I would, urge you to visit our website where we give out in detail of the various study designs that we have been supported. Sure, as long as, methodologically the rigor of your study is really strong and you can make a good case of, why you are using an observational study design and you are powered well and and you can describe and defend that as a result study, the information that we get will be really robust. Then actually we do not RCTs are of course encouraged, but that doesn't really well designed studies using other study designs are not.
All right, thank you. This time we can move on to our third talk, and then if questions arise, there'll be time at the end to address all the speakers again. So our third talk, we're pleased to have Joy Basu. Dr. Basu is Senior Economist at the Center for Evidence and Practice Improvement in the Agency for Healthcare Research, so AHRQ. And she leads the MCC research portfolio at AHRQ and serves in the Health and Human Services Interagency MCC Workgroup. She also leads numerous research projects that are focusing on healthcare access issues and is widely published in professional journals on those issues. So, Joy, thank you for being with us today. Joy, are you? Joy is on mute, maybe? Yeah, are. Is on how to open line.
It doesn't seem she's muted. I would recommend trying to just join the webinar again. That might help with what the might be.
Okay. So Joy, maybe hang up and join again, and we'll wait to hear from you. In the meantime, if anyone has any other questions. So we're waiting for Joy. Maybe I'll ask a question. In particular, and I suppose it's mostly directed at Marcel, although I'll take it from the review, about PA and any if there are any earmark funds related to multiple chronic conditions as it relates to Alzheimer's disease in particular. Because I know interest for a lot of people in both the Pepper Centers and the HMO Research Network.
So the National Alzheimer's Act, or whatever it's called, NAPA, and I checked into that, and it has been around for a couple of years, and they are doing some research planning for that. And take on it from the research, looking at the research plan, was that a lot is very focused on developing treatments for Alzheimer's disease by 2025. On the research side, I think on the program side and the dissemination side and the clinical development and models of care, I think there's much more room for condition of multiple chronic conditions. And a lot of those activities are done by other parts of the government and not NIH per se. I think NIH may be involved a little bit. So I think that like the geriatrics training aspects to NAPA are heavily related to considering multimorbidity. And I think that care being developed that could be for Alzheimer's have to take that into account as well. I think it's not there yet on the research side, I would say, but it is there on all the other sides of it. It is heavily focused on, I think, clinical trials for new treatment. While it's important for those trials, I think it's recognized multimodal Alzheimer's disease. I think it's not as explicitly recognized there. Okay. Definitely a strong opportunity, and I think there's a good research questions that I think could be developed, and I think NIA would be interested in them, but not a big focus on the research side of it. And if I could get other comment on question or they asked about the versus trial studies. I think there is a lot of activity at NIH and in collaboration with the PCORI on the PRNet and the NIH Healthcare Systems Collaboratory, which has kind of evolved out of other projects, some earlier projects with the many. I think there's really a lot of recognized by both NIH and PCORI that observational studies for comparativeness they have to be done carefully, but there's I think a lot of work for do lay the groundwork for that. That's important to recognize.
Just to answer, I should have mentioned in my talk that PCORI has a lot of vested interest on studying rare diseases. In fact, we have satellite funds for that. So to the extent that, looking at people with Alzheimer's and MCCs across any of our 5 areas of priorities, I think that would be considered favorably in terms of at least the patient population.
Thanks. And I don't know if Joy's able to join us yet. We do have another participant question as well. Mike Steinman, are you out there? Mute your line. I think my question about PCORI funding. Mike? hearing you, Mike, so if you'll submit it through the Q&A. Oh, I unmute, but you can't hear me. If you want to go ahead and submit your question that way, I can read it. So we'll get his question in just a minute.
I guess you unmute yourself on your phone as well as on the screen, I'm assuming. That's
correct. There's a little icon that you have to unmute on the screen on the WebEx interface as well as on your telephone line. Previous webinars, we had a lot of issues with back noise and feedback. So overdone it with the muting this time. And I see my icon right next to my name when I look under participants and down. And try to get Joy connected as well and working with her offline. And miking on submitting his question.
Killing me.
Well, there's a 256 character limit, so how fast he can type. That was a question for you, Dr. Arora, and it says, it seems like PCORI is moving very heavily into pragmatic RCTs. I heard your previous answer about well-designed observational studies being acceptable, but can you further clarify about receptivity to observational studies?
We are moving heavily into pragmatic RCTs. It would really depend on, ultimately, so we have like NIH merit review. When if you ask a letter of intent, at least I can speak specifically for my health systems program and others as well to some extent. If you send us a letter of intent, and that is an observational study, but it's a very important topic, it's really elegantly done. We have a good sense of why an observational study makes more sense than an RCT. You are well powered to look at overall effects as well as homogeneity effects on subpopulations. Then that would be considered. And then, of course, it's up to merit review, and then coming back based on the scores you get, then there's a decision that PCORI has to make. So there are 3 stages to our decision-making process. So there is, coming observation study is not a total no-no, but you have to make the case for why that's the study design that you want, that makes sense for your study. I hope that makes sense. We lean more heavily towards pragmatic RCTs, especially our large pragmatic program.
Thank you, Catherine, if we've had any luck with getting Joy connected. Joy?
Sure, us, but we still can't hear her.
Okay. Joy, a little bit to try. Was it? And if any have questions, feel free to submit them under the Q&A function or raise. Have.
Can you hear?
Is that?
Yeah.
Yay! Welcome. All right.
Thank you.
Well, so since our time is short, I'm just going to briefly say that we've actually already introduced you. So this is Joy from AHRQ, and welcome.
Heather, thank you. I'm Joy Basu from AHRQ. I'm delighted to be panelist today, and I'll briefly talk about AHRQ's recent initiatives to address issues related to multiple chronic conditions. Next slide. That's pretty much what I'm going to talk about today. I'll start with AHRQ's new mission and priorities, describe AHRQ's MCC research initiatives with special reference to the MCC Research Network, give specific examples of grants funded under the network, and discuss AHRQ's current funding priorities. Next slide. Action is as it is on the slide. You can just see that to evidence to make healthcare safer, higher quality, more accessible, and equitable, and affordable. Next slide. AHRQ's priority areas include improving healthcare quality through implementation of patient-centered outcome research, make healthcare safer, more affordable, efficient, and cost transparent. Next. As part of its ongoing effort to improve care for MCC patients, and this should be through evidence-based research, AHRQ has funded the MCC Research Network. That's aligns with Department of Health and Human Services MCC initiatives. Next slide, please. This MCC framework has 4 goals. Broad, these are fostering healthcare delivery and public health system, maximizing the use of self-care management, providing better tools to providers and patients, and finally, through Goal 4, HHS wants to promote research to fill knowledge gaps. Through Research Network, AHRQ has funded a total of 59 grants. Most grants supported Goal 4 of the HHS framework, that is to promote MCC research to fill knowledge gaps. Next slide, please. First phase between 2008 and 10, AHRQ funded 45 grants. The purpose to generate new knowledge and data sets on individuals with MCC. 18 exploratory and developmental grants were funded in 2008. 4 exploratory grants were funded in 2010 to conduct cognitive effectiveness research for MCC patients. 13 infrastructure developmental grants, or AHRQ-24s, were funded in 2010 to create new MCC data sets. Next slide, please. If anyone wants to learn more about the MCC Research Network, the website address is given here. You can find more information on these grants here. Many of these grants focus on the older adult age groups. Generally, the purpose of this first set of 45 grants was to design interventions that provide the greatest benefit to MCC patients as safety and effectiveness issues, and make these interventions more specific. Next is, here are a couple of examples of the grants funded on MCC. For example, the first grant actually try to examine how beta blocker use affects older adults who have coronary artery disease and COPD. A grant actually wants to determine cardiovascular risk and coronary disease management strategies following a cancer diagnosis. So, these information are available in our MCC Research Network website. Next one, please. Examples of AHRQ-24 grants, which created data sets. Data sets provide great opportunity for new investigators to use them for future MCC research. Next slide, please. 2014, AHRQ funded 14 additional grants through 2 RFAs. In the first RFA, AHRQ requested large grant applications from organizations with data sets to conduct research to optimize care for MCC patients. And RFA-AHRQ requested exploratory R21 grants to refine or develop new research methods to study MCC patients. Next slide, please. Here are a couple of examples. For the sake of time, I'm just not going to go it. Just skip this slide. Next slide, please. These are summary grant profiles that you can see once you on our website on MCC Research Networks. All these grant profiles are there and the summary information on them. Next slide. And also, AHRQ MCC Research Network also has a link to the data archive website, which houses data created through the AHRQ-24 grants. And the information is given here. The website includes information on data sets, code books, and how to access this data. Next. We have products from MCCRN also, video medical care supplement, and then infographics, chart book, and then publication in Annals of Family Medicine. Next, please. AHRQ has some internal data sets, and these are also available. If you go to the AHRQ website, you will see all this information. All two types of data sets that are mainly used by researchers is healthcare cost and utilization project and medical expenditure panel survey. This information are all available in AHRQ website. Next slide. Until now, it's called AHRQ Center for Evidence and Practice Improvement, and this center has 5 newly created divisions. The center really encourages new grants on MCC patients. Next slide, please. Next, the opportunities with the new center would be, they are interested in the MCC grants that will specifically synthesize, translate, and disseminate complex scientific evidence at the MCC patient level and inform health policy at the system and population level. And so these grants should generate new knowledge and spread techniques of practice improvement at the point of care across settings, particularly in ambulatory care, and also improve healthcare quality through use of information technology and data resources. So these are kind of the grants that we are interested in. And then really the funding mechanisms, this information is also available on the AHRQ website. NIH and AHRQ have the same grant funding process. Dr. Salive has already shared this information with us, so I'm going to elaborate on that, but I'll be happy to answer any questions on this. Next slide. I just talked about this one. Sorry. Next, please. Yeah, I'm done, so I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you so much. That was a tour de force and a lot of great information. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Our questions, I think, that's upon us. I do have one submitted question. It was just asked for all of the panelists. Are there any upcoming RFAs or equivalent that you anticipate that might be around the corner about MCCs beyond what's already been discussed here today?
So, I'd say we don't have any specific RFAs focused on just one particular topic. Those are targeted announcements that happen very rarely. Given that, I just want to reiterate that multiple chronic conditions has been identified as a priority condition for PCORI. So each of our funding cycles has dedicated money allocated to it. So in one sense, it's quasi a format, and this topic is of interest. So please consider applying for these, as long as these are based on interventions with efficacy data. Thank you.
At NIH, I don't know of any upcoming RFAs, but that just gives you a horizon of like 6 months. So there are any in the next 6 months, but there may be some after that.
Yeah, we don't have any specific one yet. It may come, but not yet. It's not final yet.
AHRQ will upon us, and again, thank you so much. Apologize for the technical difficulties. If there are additional questions, if you can submit them to me through the Q&A or through email, heather.whitson@duke.edu. I will pass them on to the appropriate panelists. Thank you again, everyone, for attending the webinar. Thanks to our three speakers.
Thank you very much. Bye.